I heard the key turn in the lock, and my stomach dropped. "Eva!" I called out, but my daughter's heels were already clicking away. I was in the basement. No light, no stairs. Just the cold concrete and the smell of old paint. Today was my 75th birthday. I'd baked my own cake. I'd asked if we could share a quiet moment before her friends arrived. She looked at me, her face hard, eyes like strangers, and said, "You've had enough attention for one life." Then she locked the door. My own child. On my birthday, I didn't raise her to become this. I didn't spend sleepless nights rocking her fevered body in my arms, praying over every breath, just to be locked away like a forgotten relic. Eva was everything to me once. She was born on a rainy afternoon in May. I remember because the hospital window fogged up, and I wrote her name on it with my fingertip. Evelyn. My husband George held her before I did. He cried when he saw her, his calloused hands trembling like a boy's. "She's the best of both of us," he whispered, and I believed him. But I only had George for 6 more years. He was killed in a construction accident. A beam collapsed, the kind that makes the news for a day and disappears by the next morning. I remember the way my knees buckled when the officer told me. Eva was too little to understand, just 4 years old and clinging to my nightgown asking, "Where's Daddy?" I couldn't answer her. I just held her and cried until my voice gave out. From that day on, I was 2 people, mother and father. I took night shifts cleaning office buildings and early morning shifts serving coffee in a diner downtown. There were days I didn't sleep at all, just moved from one job to the next. I used to tape notes to her lunchbox, little hearts and stick figures, just so she'd remember I loved her even when I couldn't be home. We had our little rituals. Sunday morning pancakes, always shaped like animals. Giraffes were her favorite. Wednesday nights we watched her favorite show together, even when I'd seen the same episode 100 times. Birthdays were sacred. I always made a big deal of them, not because we had much money, but because I wanted her to feel like the center of the universe the way George used to make me feel. She was a good child. Curious, smart, with a giggle that sounded like wind chimes in the spring. I still hear it sometimes in my dreams. I remember when she got accepted into college, a full scholarship. I screamed so loud the neighbor thought something was wrong. I was proud beyond words, though part of me ached knowing she'd be leaving. Still, I packed her bags, bought her a used microwave and a cheap rug, and sent her off with every dollar I could scrape together. When she graduated, I sat in the front row wearing a dress 2 sizes too tight because it was the only nice one I owned. I watched her walk across that stage with her head high, and I remember thinking we made it. All those nights, all that exhaustion, it was worth it. She hugged me afterward quickly, and then rushed off with her boyfriend and some friends. I didn't think much of it at the time. She was young, busy, starting her life. I gave her the house key when she moved back home after college. "It's yours as much as mine," I told her. She looked surprised. I thought it was gratitude in her eyes, but now I wonder if it was something else. Calculating, maybe. She started working at a local marketing firm. Said she needed to save up before getting a place of her own. I was fine with that. I was happy to have her back. We fell into old routines, movie nights, shared dinners, folding laundry together while talking about her work gossip. It felt like the years hadn't touched us at all. There were small things, of course. She started keeping her door closed more often. Her phone never left her hand. She rolled her eyes when I asked her to help with the garden, but I chalked it up to adulthood. We all change. Back then I still believed love, real maternal love, was a rope strong enough to hold anyone. That no matter how far they wandered, they'd come home, tugging on the thread we'd woven over years of sacrifice and devotion. I didn't notice when it began to fray. The truth is, I clung to the image of Eva as a little girl in pigtails with jam on her cheeks. The teenager who cried into my arms after her first heartbreak. The young woman who still called me mama, in soft, tired moments. I didn't want to see what was becoming of her. Or maybe I did see and refused to admit it. When she started suggesting I sell the house, I laughed it off. When she made comments about how people our age shouldn't be living alone, I assumed she was just concerned. I gave her my whole life. My youth, my strength, my home. I remember one night, not long before my 75th birthday, I stayed up late sorting old photos. I found one of George holding Eva in our backyard, under the big oak tree he planted himself. The house looked so alive then. Ivy on the walls, wind chimes on the porch, toys in the grass. That house was never just a building. It was our sanctuary, our legacy. I didn't know she wanted to erase it. Erase me. If I'd known then what she'd planned, what she was capable of, maybe I would have fought harder, asked more questions, paid closer attention. But love can make you blind, and I loved her more than I loved myself. I thought I'd given her everything, but apparently it wasn't enough. The changes didn't come all at once. That's the thing about betrayal. It sneaks in slowly, disguised as everyday life. If you're not watching closely, it feels like nothing's wrong until everything is. First, it was little things. Eva started coming home later. No calls, no explanations, just silence. She'd walk through the door, toss her purse on the chair I always asked her not to use, and head straight to her room. If I asked how her day went, I'd get a shrug or a mumbled, "Tiring." She stopped eating dinner with me. We used to sit at the table, even if it was just for 20 minutes. We'd talk about our day, laugh at old memories. Now she took her plate to her room, or said she wasn't hungry, even if I'd made her favorite roast chicken or shepherd's pie. She never said thank you anymore. Not out loud, at least. I tried to ignore it. I told myself she was just stressed. Work was hard, relationships were complicated. Young people needed space. But the house felt different. Cold. As if she'd left the warmth at the door when she came in. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone in the kitchen. She didn't see me in the hallway. She was laughing, really laughing for the first time in weeks. She still thinks this is her house, she said. Then a pause. No, it's only a matter of time. I've been doing everything. She just exists. I didn't move. I don't even remember breathing. She hung up quickly after that. I walked back to my room and sat on the edge of the bed like a ghost. Maybe I'd misheard. Maybe she was talking about someone else. But the truth hung heavy in my chest, even as I denied it. She started questioning everything I did. Why was I still paying the utility bills? Why hadn't I updated the house deed? She said it in passing, but there was always a sharpness under her words. A challenge. A claim. One morning I found my bank statement open on the kitchen counter. I hadn't printed it. I never leave that information out. When I asked if she'd seen it, she said, "You probably just forgot. You're always misplacing things lately." It wasn't what she said, it was how she said it. Slow, deliberate, condescending. Like she knew something I didn't. Like I wasn't all there. I started questioning myself after that. I'd look twice at the stove, double-check the mail. Did I forget to water the plants? Did I already take my pills? I felt like I was unraveling thread by thread. The worst part? I still wanted to believe she loved me. That hope made me tolerate things I shouldn't have. Like the time she interrupted me mid-sentence during a conversation with our neighbor, Helen, and said, "Mom, please don't start rambling. You know how you get." I laughed it off, trying not to let Helen see the hurt in my eyes. Or when she brought her fiancé, Matt, over for dinner and never introduced me, just let me serve them food like some hired help. When I tried to join their conversation, she gave me a look that silenced me instantly. Matt wasn't much better. He was polite in a way that felt fake. Forced smiles, eyes that never really looked at you. He'd occasionally say things like, "You should get your mom into one of those communities. It'd be good for her, you know, company, support." And Eva would nod, almost like they'd rehearsed it. I started feeling like a guest in my own home. There were rooms I wasn't allowed to enter anymore because Eva was organizing. Whole drawers had been cleared out and replaced with her things. My baking supplies were moved, my recipe box vanished. When I asked where it went, she said she hadn't seen it, then changed the subject. I searched every inch of that house. Never found it. The power balance shifted without me realizing it. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being the homeowner and became the tolerated inconvenience. My daughter moved with a confidence that didn't match her words. She spoke as if she had ownership, as if the future of the house was hers to plan. I was just in the way. She once joked, "You know, you should write down your will just in case. You don't want things to get messy." Messy. That word rang in my ears long after the conversation ended. It wasn't just the loss of affection. It was the erosion of respect. I could handle being lonely, but being looked down on, being dismissed in my own home, that was something else entirely. Still, I kept trying. I made her lunch for work. I washed her clothes. I left notes in her room with little hearts like I used to. She never mentioned them. One evening I brought up George. I'd lit a candle in the living room, sat down with our wedding album. I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd sit beside me, look at the old photos, remember where we came from. She glanced over and said, "Do we really need to keep clinging to the past?" She didn't even look at his face. I cried that night. Quietly. In the bathroom with the faucet running so she wouldn't hear. There was a heaviness in me I couldn't name back then. Like I was standing on the edge of something terrible, and didn't know how to step back. I was scared. Not of my daughter, but of what I might discover if I stopped making excuses for her. I still hoped I was imagining things. But deep down I think I already knew. Something precious was dying between us. Something I couldn't bring back with roast chicken or birthday cakes. And I feared the worst was yet to come. It was the Tuesday before my 75th birthday when Eva first hinted she was planning something small. She said it like a chore, not a celebration. "Just a few friends, nothing major," she mumbled while scrolling on her phone. I smiled anyway. "You don't have to make a fuss," I said, though part of me hoped she would. I baked my own cake. Not because I had to, but because it felt right. My mother's old lemon chiffon recipe, the one George used to request every year. It took me 3 hours between whipping egg whites and grating zest. The kitchen smelled like old times. Warm, bright, hopeful. The morning of my birthday, I set the cake on the dining table with a smile. It was quiet in the house, too quiet. Eva was already gone, off to run errands for the party. She hadn't said much over breakfast. Just told me to stay downstairs and rest until everything was set up. I felt the shift then like cold air beneath the doorframe. Around 4 in the afternoon, I heard the front door open. Voices. Laughter. Eva's friends. Strangers to me. Loud music started playing, cheerful pop, not something I could hum along to. I waited at the top of the basement stairs, wearing the blue blouse Eva once said made me look elegant. I held the edge of the railing, listening for her voice. Nothing. I stepped up just enough to peek into the hallway. I could see the edge of the living room, balloons, wine glasses, the back of Matt's head. Then I heard her. "Yeah, I told her to stay downstairs. She'll ruin the vibe," Eva said. Someone laughed. "Don't worry. She won't come up. She knows better." I froze. My chest tightened. I wasn't sure what hurt more, her words or how easily they came. As if I were an afterthought. As if I didn't belong in my own home. I stepped up one more stair. That's when she saw me. Our eyes met across the room. Her smile faltered, then returned, forced and thin. "Mom," she said sharply, walking over. "I told you to stay downstairs." "I just thought I'd say hello," I said softly. "Maybe have a slice of cake with you?" She looked behind her, then back at me. Her voice dropped to a whisper, firm and cruel. "You've had enough attention for one life." Before I could respond, she guided me back down the stairs with a hand on my shoulder. Not gently. Not lovingly. And then, I still can't believe it even now, I heard the door shut behind me. The lock clicked. First I didn't move. I stood there in the half-darkness, staring at the closed door. I waited for her to open it, to laugh and say it was a joke. But minutes passed. Then hours. No footsteps. No voice calling me back up. Just the distant sound of clinking glasses and muffled music. And me. Alone. I sat on an old stool, knees aching, heart pounding. The basement was cold. I wrapped myself in an old laundry blanket. My birthday cake, the one I'd baked with trembling hands and hope in my heart, was probably sitting untouched on the counter. Or worse, thrown away. I tried not to cry. I tried to be strong. But I felt like a discarded piece of furniture. Forgotten in the way, collecting dust. I thought about George. He would have never let this happen. He would have stood by me, said something, done something. I missed his voice, his steadiness. I missed being someone's first thought, not an inconvenience. After what felt like forever, the music finally stopped. Doors opened, laughter trailed off. Car engines rumbled outside. Still no one came for me. When the lock finally clicked again, it was Matt who opened the door. "You can come out now," he said flatly, not even meeting my eyes. Eva was in the kitchen, wiping the counters. The cake was gone. "How could you do that to me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She didn't answer right away. Just kept cleaning like I wasn't there. "Eva." She finally turned. Her face wasn't angry. It was worse, it was indifferent. I told you I needed space. You can't just show up whenever you want, she said. I stared at her, stunned. I live here. For now, she muttered and walked away. Those two words carved something deep into me. For now. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator, the echo of Eva's laughter from earlier still ringing in my ears. The next morning the trash was full of paper plates, plastic forks, and, at the very bottom, my cake. Uneaten. Crushed beneath half a bottle of wine and someone's lipstick-smeared napkin. I pulled it out with trembling hands. A chunk of it was still intact. I took a bite standing barefoot in the kitchen, tears sliding down my cheeks. It was dry. It was bitter. It was the best cake I'd ever made. I threw the rest away and sat down at the table, my hands clenched around a coffee mug that had long gone cold. I didn't cry anymore. There were no tears left in me. Just silence and something new. A quiet fury beginning to rise, slow and steady. That was the day something changed in me. Up until then I'd excused everything. I'd swallowed every slight, every dismissal, every cruel word. I told myself she was tired, stressed, confused. But now I saw it clearly. This wasn't stress. This wasn't confusion. This was a choice. Eva had chosen to humiliate me. She had chosen to treat me like I was disposable. And I had let her. But not anymore. A few days passed after the birthday. Or maybe it was a week. Time didn't move the same anymore. I felt like I was drifting through my own home like a shadow, unseen and unspoken to. Eva barely acknowledged me. She moved with the smug silence of someone who believed she'd won something. And maybe she had for a little while. But I started watching her differently. I stopped speaking as much, started listening instead. That was when the real truth began to reveal itself. It started with a manila envelope I found wedged between magazines on the hall table. I wasn't snooping, I swear I wasn't. But when the envelope slipped and paper spilled out, my heart nearly stopped. Forms. Legal-looking documents. With my name on them. One was titled Durable Power of Attorney. Another had bold letters. Property Transfer Authorization. I didn't understand all of it at first, but I saw enough. My name was there. So was Eva's. And the house address. My house. The signature line for me was blank. I gathered the pages with shaking hands and put them back. My breath was shallow, cold sweat dampening my back. I didn't know what scared me more. The documents themselves, or the fact that she hadn't even asked me yet. As if she knew she wouldn't need to. Later that night, I waited until she was asleep. I crept into the office she'd claimed as her workspace and opened her desk drawer. My recipe box was in there. I stared at it for a long time. She hadn't lost it. She'd taken it. It sat in the back corner, dusty and unused like me. Beside it, more papers. Emails printed out. Correspondence with a lawyer. The words petition for guardianship stopped me cold. That's when it hit me. She wasn't just taking over the house. She was trying to take over me. My life. My decisions. My name. The breath left my body. I sat down right there on the floor, clutching the stack of papers. I thought of George, of the promises we made. This house was our foundation. We'd planted that oak tree in the backyard together. We'd painted every wall. We'd buried his ashes beneath the rose bush out front. And now my own daughter was plotting to sign it away without a word. Without a single conversation. She saw me as something in the way. That night I had a dream about George. He stood in the hallway holding a mug of tea, watching me the way he used to after long days. Calm. Silent. His eyes said everything. Don't let her take what we built. The next morning I played dumb. I smiled when Eva walked in. I even offered to make her breakfast. She declined as always. I found some old insurance letters in the mail, I said casually, watching her face. Thinking of maybe getting things sorted. Just in case. She froze for a moment, barely a flicker, and then said, "That's a good idea. Let me know if you need help with anything." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. I knew then that she thought I didn't suspect a thing. That was her first mistake. I started keeping a small notebook. I wrote everything down, what she said, what time she left, who called the house. I started taking pictures of the documents when she wasn't home. I even bought a little recording device from the pharmacy and hid it under the edge of the kitchen table. I wasn't tech-savvy, but I was determined. I also started visiting old friends again. Quietly. Slipped away during Eva's long work meetings and walked to the church 2 blocks over. I spoke to Sister Grace, who had been our neighbor since Eva was born. She listened without interrupting. Then she took my hand and said, "You're not crazy. And you're not alone." She introduced me to a woman named Clara, a retired nurse who'd gone through something eerily similar with her own son. Clara connected me with a lawyer named Mr. Harris, a gentle man in his 60s who wore cardigans and never rushed a single word. "I've seen daughters like Eva before," he said gently. "This is about control and entitlement, but we can take steps to protect you." It felt strange, sitting in that office with my trembling hands and broken heart, discussing wills and guardianship as if I were already dead. But it was also the first time in weeks I felt safe. We drafted a new will. We began setting up legal protections. We made plans, quiet ones. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. I still had to live under her roof, though technically it was mine. I still had to eat across from her at the dinner table, still had to listen to her hum to herself as she planned out a future where I didn't exist. But every time she smiled that smug little smile, every time she made a snide comment about downsizing or modernizing the home, I smiled right back, because I knew what was coming. She thought I was old. She thought I was slow. She thought she'd won. But she didn't know who she was dealing with. Have you ever felt betrayed by your own family? Let us know in the comments. It was a Tuesday again, the kind of day that drags, gray and heavy. Eva came home late, tossed her coat over the back of the chair again, and opened a bottle of wine. I stood in the doorway of the kitchen, watching her pour 2 glasses. "Matt coming over?" I asked. She looked up slowly, her face carefully blank. "No. This one's for me." I nodded and stepped inside. "Can we talk?" She sighed dramatically, as if the mere sound of my voice was a chore. "Mom, if this is about the mail again, I've already told you." "It's not," I said, keeping my voice calm. I reached for the chair across from her and sat down. She didn't look at me, just sipped her wine and scrolled her phone. "I found the papers, Eva," I said softly. "The ones about transferring the house. The guardianship forms. I know everything." Her thumb paused mid-scroll. For a moment she didn't move. Didn't blink. Then she laughed, sharp, bitter. "Oh God. Did you go snooping again? You really don't have boundaries anymore, do you?" "I live here," I said quietly, "and I'm still capable of understanding what's happening around me, no matter what you've told your lawyer." She rolled her eyes. "You don't understand, Mom. You've got this twisted idea that you're still running things. But this house is falling apart. You're not managing the bills. You barely keep up with anything. I'm trying to help you." "By locking me in the basement?" I asked. Her eyes narrowed. "That was exaggerated. You're being dramatic." I stared at her. "You humiliated me. On my birthday." A flicker of discomfort crossed her face. Then it was gone. "You just don't know what's best for you anymore," she said, quieter now. "You're old. You can't keep holding on to things like this house. It's not the 80s. You need structure. Support." "I had structure," I said, folding my hands. "Then you started tearing it apart." She looked like she wanted to argue, but something in my tone stopped her. "You think I'm slipping," I said. "That I'm confused. Weak. But you're wrong, Eva. I see you clearly now." Her jaw clenched. "You don't know what you're talking about." I stood up. "You should be careful what you assume people don't see." Then I turned and walked out of the kitchen, heart thundering like a war drum. My hands were shaking, but I felt something rising in me I hadn't felt in a long time, power. She didn't follow me. That night I called Clara, told her everything. She listened, then said quietly, "She's pushing because she thinks you're going to cave. But you don't have to. Not anymore." The next few days were quiet. Eva moved around the house like a cat, watching, calculating. She barely spoke, but I could feel the tension every time we crossed paths. She was nervous, and that made me stronger. One afternoon, while sweeping the porch, Helen from next door came over with a tin of cookies. She glanced around and leaned close. "I saw Eva with a real estate agent last week," she whispered. They were taking photos of the house from the street. My stomach turned. She said you were moving into assisted living and that she'd be taking care of things now, Helen added. I smiled gently. Thank you, Helen. That's good to know. Inside I burned. That evening, I laid the recording device in the living room while pretending to watch television. I left it running during dinner, during her phone call with Matt, during the brief moment when she sat on the couch and muttered, "If she just signs the paper, this whole thing will be over." The next morning I played it back. Crystal clear. I copied it to a flash drive and stored it in my sock drawer. Later that week I went back to Mr. Harris, my lawyer. We reviewed the recordings, the notes, the documents. He smiled gently and said, "You've built a strong case, Marjorie. This isn't just negligence. This is coercion. And manipulation." We filed the final documents that day. Her name was removed from everything. My new will was signed and notarized. The clause was clear. If Eva contested anything, the house and all my assets would go to a women's shelter fund and elder care charity. Not a penny to her. I walked out of that office with a copy of the paperwork in my handbag, my shoulders a little straighter. That night, Eva came home with takeout, a rare gesture. "I got Chinese," she said without looking at me. "Thought you might want some." I accepted the food, sat at the table, and watched her pretend to be normal. She smiled like nothing had changed. But everything had. Because now I wasn't just surviving. I was waiting. She had no idea the ground beneath her feet was already shifting. The office was quiet. Soft jazz played from a speaker in the corner, and the scent of lemon cleaner lingered faintly in the air. Mr. Harris sat across from me with a yellow legal pad, glasses low on his nose, waiting patiently as I stared at the stack of documents on the table between us. "Are you sure you're ready?" he asked, his voice calm but firm. I nodded slowly. My hands trembled a little as I reached for the pen, but my grip was steady when I touched it to the paper. "I've been ready," I said. It took less than 15 minutes to change the course of everything. We started with the will. Eva was removed completely. Not a mention of her name, not a penny to her name. I left everything to a women's housing initiative in town, Margaret's Place, named after the woman who once helped my own mother escape an abusive marriage. Full circle in a way. Then came the clause Mr. Harris had insisted on. A no-contest clause. If Eva tried to challenge the will in any way, all assets would go to charity. No second chances, no loopholes. "Do you want to leave anything to your grandchildren?" he asked gently. I thought of Ava, Eva's daughter. 13 years old, awkward and sweet, with braces and too much kindness in her eyes for a girl being raised in that house. She always hugged me tight, even when Eva scolded her for being too clingy. "I'll leave her a letter," I said. "But not money. That'll only draw Eva back to her." He nodded. Then came the trust. Mr. Harris helped me create one for the house. If anything happened to me, it would be turned into transitional housing for elderly women with no family left. They'd live there with dignity, with peace. No more hiding in basements. No more silencing mothers who'd given everything. We signed the last form, and I slid the pen back across the table. I felt hollow for a moment. Not regretful, just empty. Like a balloon finally letting go of all the air it had held inside for far too long. Mr. Harris stood, shook my hand, and placed the papers in a folder. "You did the hard thing," he said. "Most people never get this far." I smiled faintly. I loved her. I still do in a strange way. But loving someone doesn't mean letting them destroy you. When I got home, the house was quiet. Eva was out, some dinner or meeting I didn't ask. I walked through the front door and paused in the entryway, soaking in the familiar scent of wood polish and lavender. For the first time in months, it felt like my home again. I made a cup of tea, sat in George's old recliner, and stared out the window. The oak tree in the front yard had started to shed its leaves. Autumn was coming. Change was in the air. Later that evening, I opened my closet and pulled out the small fireproof box I'd bought the week before. I placed the will, the trust paperwork, and a flash drive with recordings and photos inside. Then I tucked it behind my old winter boots. Before bed, I wrote the letter to Ava. "My sweet girl. If you're reading this one day, please know this wasn't about anger. It was about respect. About not letting myself disappear just because the world decided I was finished. I hope one day you understand that strength doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like walking away. And I hope you grow up to be the kind of woman who never lets anyone lock her in a basement. Love you more than lemon cake. Grandma. I folded the letter, kissed it gently, and placed it in my dresser drawer. The next morning, Eva walked into the kitchen looking tired. Her hair was disheveled, eyes shadowed. I need to talk to you about the house, she said, pouring coffee without asking if I wanted any. I sat down slowly. Oh. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Matt and I have been looking at condos. Downtown. Something with less maintenance. I sipped my tea. Sounds expensive. She blinked, caught off guard by my tone. Well, yeah, but it's time we both move on. This house is too big for you. You think I should move out? I said. She nodded. It's not safe for someone your age to be alone in a place like this. And honestly, I could take care of things better from a legal standpoint. It'd be easier if the deed were in my name. I'm not trying to steal anything. I'm trying to help. She said it like she believed it. Like she was noble. I stood slowly. I already took care of the legal part. She frowned. What do you mean? I walked past her, calm as still water. You'll find out soon enough. The words weren't cruel. They weren't loud. But they landed like bricks. She stared after me, confused, maybe even a little afraid, for the first time truly unsure of what I was capable of. And that's when I knew. I wasn't powerless anymore. I was prepared. I had done the hard thing. I had protected myself the way no one else ever had. I thought of George that night as I folded laundry. I imagined him sitting beside me, quiet and proud. I whispered into the empty room. I did what you would have done. The weight in my chest eased just a little. I still had more to face. But now I was ready for it. It happened on a Thursday. I remember because the church bells were ringing at noon when Eva barged through the front door, heels clicking like thunder across the hardwood floor. She was talking on the phone loud, sharp. No, she still hasn't signed anything. I don't care what the lawyer says, Matt. I'll handle it. It's my house now whether she likes it or not. She paused when she saw me sitting at the kitchen table. Her lips tightened into a thin line. She hung up without a word and tossed her purse onto the counter. We need to talk, she said, crossing her arms. I put down my tea. I'm listening. I've spoken to a new attorney, she began. A better one. And we're moving forward with the guardianship petition. I said nothing. Her voice hardened. You've been erratic. Writing notes to yourself. Recording conversations. That's not normal, Mom. I'm worried about your mental health. The lie was so bold, so rehearsed, I almost laughed. Instead, I looked at her calmly. You're not worried. You're impatient. She blinked. You want me out. You want the house. And you're running out of ways to get it without making yourself look like the villain. I don't want to argue, she said, but her voice had lost its edge. I just want what's best for both of us. Eva, I said, slowly standing, you don't get to decide what's best for me. She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. No more pretending, I said. I've seen the papers. I've heard the phone calls. I know everything. For a moment something flashed in her eyes. Not shame, not regret. Panic. She turned away. You're tired. You're confused. This is exactly why you need help. I have help, I interrupted. Legal help. Support. Everything you think I don't have, I do. Her shoulders stiffened. What did you do? I protected myself, I said. And I protected this house. You don't own it. You never will. She stood frozen for a long moment. Then she grabbed her phone and stormed into her room, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I stood there in the kitchen, the air still humming with tension. That was the moment I realized the line had been crossed completely. There was no walking back. No apology big enough. No gentle conversation to fix what she'd tried to take from me. And I was done giving her chances. That night I stayed up late packing a folder. Copies of the will, trust, the clause, the voice recordings, photos of the form she'd hidden from me. I slid everything into a zippered case and placed it by the front door. Then I took out a yellow pad and began writing. Names. Times. Events. Everything. I listed the night of my birthday and how she locked me downstairs. I described the conversation I overheard about the real estate agent, the day I found my recipe box, the lies she told to the neighbors. Each word hurt. Not because it was hard to write, but because it made me realize how much I'd let her get away with. She didn't take it all at once. She chipped away at me over time, and I let her. Until now. The next morning, I made a call to Mr. Harris and told him I was ready for the next step. We picked a date and set it in stone. I don't want a courtroom, I told him. I want her to know in front of the people she was trying to impress. He understood immediately. Then we'll do it your way, he said. That same afternoon, a letter came in the mail addressed to me but clearly written by Eva. I recognized her neat, tidy handwriting. It was an invitation. A celebration dinner, she called it. A formal gathering to announce her and Matt's new business venture and their future plans for the house. I read it 3 times before setting it down on the table. So that was it. She was going to announce my fate like a bullet point on a PowerPoint slide. Smile through it. Pretend she was doing me a favor while privately arranging to uproot my entire life. She had no idea what was coming. I spent the next 2 days preparing. Not just paperwork, my presents. I bought a new blouse, soft gray with blue flowers. I pulled out the necklace George gave me on our 25th anniversary. I practiced what I would say, how I would stand, how I would breathe. And the folder? It stayed zipped, unopened until the very last moment. I didn't want to read it again. I already knew every line by heart. The night before the dinner, I sat alone in the living room, lights low, sipping tea. The house was quiet. Eva was at Matt's, probably rehearsing her speech. I could almost hear her words. My mother is moving into a beautiful community. We're so lucky to start this next chapter. I glanced around the room. Every photograph, every scratch in the wood floor, every memory embedded in these walls. They weren't hers to give away. They were mine. And I wasn't finished with them yet. When I went to bed that night, I placed the folder beside my purse. Tomorrow would be the last time I let her define who I was. Tomorrow I'd speak the truth. And this time everyone would hear it. The dining room was already full when I arrived. I stood quietly at the door for a moment, folder tucked under my arm, watching through the entryway as Eva moved from guest to guest like a seasoned hostess. Her laughter was bright, her smile perfect, not a crack in sight. The chandelier sparkled above the table. Silverware gleamed. A spread of catered food lined the sideboard. I recognized none of the faces in the room. Eva's colleagues, Matt's investor friends, people who called her darling and visionary. And there at the center was my house. Framed photos from the backyard, renderings of what's coming soon. One board read, Future Site, Silverstone Living Boutique Wellness Retreat. The photo of the home had been airbrushed, my rose bushes replaced with a modern deck, the oak tree nowhere in sight. I stepped inside. The noise didn't stop immediately, but I felt a ripple. People turned, faces stiffened. Eva noticed me a beat later. Her eyes widened. Panic flickered just briefly. "Mom," she said, walking over briskly. "You weren't supposed to." "You invited me," I said, holding up the card. "I assumed you wanted me to be here." She looked around quickly, lowering her voice. "Can we talk in the kitchen?" "No," I said. "We're going to talk right here." Someone nearby chuckled nervously. The room fell into an uneasy hush. Matt stepped up beside her. "Is everything okay?" "Perfectly fine," I said, turning to face the room. "I won't take much of your time. I just want to clear up a few things before you continue discussing my house, as if I'm already gone." Silence. A fork clinked against a plate somewhere in the back. "I'm Marjorie," I said. "I built this home with my husband, George, 50 years ago. We raised our daughter, Eva, here. Every brick, every tree, every laugh inside these walls, it belonged to us. Not a company, not a brand, and certainly not a retreat." Eva stepped forward. "Mom, please." I opened the folder and held up the paperwork. "This is my will. It was updated last month. Eva is no longer part of it. Should she contest any portion, the entire estate, including this house, will be transferred to a local women's shelter initiative." A few gasped. Someone whispered, "Is this real?" I continued, voice steady. "This is a signed trust agreement. It protects the house from being sold or transferred without my direct consent. Which means no wellness center, no condos, no business venture." Matt tried to speak, but I held up my hand. "I'm not finished." I turned to Eva. Her face was pale now, her lips parted, trembling just slightly. This is a flash drive containing audio recordings of several conversations. Ones where you discuss transferring the house without my knowledge, questioned my mental health in order to claim guardianship, and even locked me in the basement during my birthday party. There was a stunned silence. A woman at the food table set her plate down and walked away. Eva's voice cracked. "You don't understand." "No," I said. "You don't." I stepped forward, eyes locked on hers. "You don't understand what it means to sacrifice. You don't understand what it means to give someone your life and watch them spit it back at you. You looked at me and saw inconvenience, obstacle, baggage." I swallowed, heart pounding. "I looked at you and saw my little girl. Always." The silence in the room was suffocating. Not one person moved. I took a breath and turned back to the crowd. "I'm not here to shame her. I'm here to stop her. To remind everyone, especially her, that love isn't silent. And respect isn't optional." Then I placed the folder gently on the table, picked up one of the renderings of the future house plan, and turned it face down. "Not here," I said. "Not this house." With that I walked out. I didn't wait for applause. I didn't look back to see the fallout. I didn't need to. I stepped into the cool night air. The weight on my shoulders lifted finally after years of quiet tolerance. The air smelled of lilacs. The moon hung low, soft and full, as if lighting my path forward. Inside I could hear voices rising. A man said, "She recorded you?" Another asked, "Is that even legal?" Matt's voice frantic. "We didn't do anything wrong." And Eva's, quieter than I'd ever heard her. "Mom." But I was already walking. I passed the oak tree on the front lawn, older now, weathered but strong. Like me. When I reached the street I paused. For a second I thought I might cry. But I didn't. I smiled. Because I had finally spoken the truth. And everyone had heard it. Do you think the mother made the right choice? Comment and don't forget to like and subscribe for more true life stories. The house was quiet when I returned. Too quiet. The echoes of that night still lingered in the walls. Not the shouting or gasps or even Eva's stunned silence, but something deeper. The truth had been spoken finally. And truth doesn't leave quietly. It hums in the corners, rattles in the baseboards, changes the air. I locked the door behind me and walked slowly through the front hallway. The photo of George and me on our wedding day still hung beside the coat rack, tilted slightly. I reached out and straightened it, just as I had 1,000 times before. And then I sat down. The same old armchair by the fireplace, the cushion a little worn in the middle. My body sank into it like it remembered me, like it had been waiting. I don't remember how long I sat there. No one called. No one came. Not Eva. Not Matt. Not any of the people who had once smiled at me over dinners, clapped for Eva's promotions, or asked to borrow the spare bedroom during renovations. Not one of them reached out. For the first few days, the house was heavy with silence. I swept the kitchen floor, watered the plants, reorganized the linen closet, all things I'd done 100 times. But this time it felt different. Not hollow exactly. Just quiet in a way that asked me to sit with myself. The phone rang once. I didn't recognize the number. I let it go to voicemail. The message was from a woman named Leanne, one of Eva's coworkers, I think. Her voice was hesitant. "Mrs. Whitmore, I just wanted to say, I didn't know about what your daughter was doing. And I'm sorry. You didn't deserve that. I hope you're okay." I saved it. I listened to it again later that night. Not because it healed me, but because it reminded me that someone had seen me. Really seen me. Even if only for a moment. The town, as expected, began to whisper. Helen from next door brought over a blueberry pie and pretended she didn't know a thing. But her eyes said otherwise. "I always knew something was off about that Matt fella," she said, setting the pie on the counter. "Too smooth. Never once asked how your garden was doing." We sat on the porch that afternoon, sipping tea while pretending the world hadn't cracked open. She didn't pry. She just stayed. Sometimes that's enough. By the end of the week I started walking again. Down the block, past the old hardware store. Through the little park where George once pushed Eva on the swings. The air had a crispness to it. The tail end of summer giving way to fall. The leaves were just beginning to turn. I found a rhythm. Wake up. Tea. Sweep. Sit. Walk. Breathe. Repeat. For the first time in a long while, no one was telling me what I should be doing. No one was hovering, managing, suggesting a better system. The silence, which had felt unbearable at first, started to soften. It became space. Room to think. To grieve. To heal. I missed Eva. I wish I could say I didn't, but I did. I missed the child she used to be. The girl who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during movies. The teenager who came home crying after her first breakup and buried her face in my neck. The young woman who sent postcards from college that read, "Miss you like crazy, Mama." But that girl was gone. And the woman who replaced her, the one who could lock her own mother in a basement and call it necessary. I couldn't miss that. I could only mourn it. I thought of George often, especially at night. I'd talk to him in whispers, silly maybe, but it brought me peace. "You'd be proud," I told him once, standing at the kitchen sink with the window open. I didn't let her take it. Not this house. Not me. And I think somehow he knew. A few days after the confrontation, something unexpected happened. A knock at the door. I opened it slowly, heart pounding. It was Eva's daughter. My granddaughter. She looked nervous, standing there in a hoodie and jeans, clutching a brown paper bag. "Mom doesn't know I'm here," she said quickly. I stepped aside. She walked in like she always used to, kicking off her shoes, glancing around the house as if checking to make sure everything was still there. "Still home." "I brought cookies," she said, holding up the bag. "I made them. They're kind of burnt." We sat at the table. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. We just ate cookies, some hard, some soft, and talked about school, her new art teacher, and how she wanted to dye her hair but wasn't brave enough yet. When she left, she hugged me longer than usual. Whispered, "I love you, Grandma," like it was a secret. It was the first crack of sunlight after a long, dark winter, and it reminded me that not everything was lost. Just shifted. Some things you lose forever. Others you rebuild from the broken pieces. And as I stood in the doorway that evening, watching Eva walk down the front path, I realized something else. This house still had life in it. And so did I. The morning after Eva's visit, I stood in the living room, holding a cup of warm tea, looking around at the walls that had watched me suffer and survive. The house felt different now. Not just because Eva was gone, but because for the first time in years I was standing in it without fear. It didn't feel like a trap anymore. It felt like a beginning. I didn't have a clear plan that day. Just a tug in my chest, gentle but persistent. A voice, maybe George's, maybe my own, whispering, "You're not done yet." Later that week, I went to the church rummage sale and ran into Clara, the woman who'd helped me contact Mr. Harris. She was sorting through coats, her silver hair tied up in a neat bun. "Marjorie," she said with a warm smile, "you look lighter." "I feel lighter," I replied. She linked her arm through mine and said, "Then come with me. I have someone I want you to meet." That someone was Teresa, a retired social worker with sharp eyes and a voice like velvet. We sat together in a corner of the church basement, sipping instant coffee from paper cups while she told me about the growing number of elderly women with nowhere to go. Some of them had families, she said. Some didn't. But most were simply forgotten. I knew that feeling all too well. Teresa's group was small but committed. They offered temporary housing, counseling, food support. But they didn't have enough beds. "We have a waiting list a mile long," she said, her eyes tired. "If only we had more space." Something clicked in me then. Space. I had it. Empty rooms. Quiet halls. Bedrooms that once echoed with life and now sat collecting dust. "I might be able to help," I said. Her brows lifted slightly. "How so?" And I told her. About the house. The will. The trust. The heartbreak. And the need, deep and urgent, to turn this pain into purpose. That very week we started planning. I began by clearing the rooms. Eva had left things behind, clothes, boxes, high heels she never wore. I donated every bit of it. Stripped the rooms bare. Painted over old wallpaper with calming colors, pale blues, gentle grays. I opened the windows. Let in light. Let in air. The home began to breathe again. Word spread quickly through the network. A woman named Ruth arrived first, 72, small-framed, with bruises under her eyes that had nothing to do with fists and everything to do with sorrow. Her son had taken her pension and left her at a bus station. She hadn't stopped shaking when I met her. I gave her the guest room, the one Eva used to sleep in before college. I changed the sheets, fluffed the pillows, put a vase of lilacs on the windowsill. Ruth cried when she saw it. Next came Dolores, a widow who'd sold her home to move in with her daughter, only to be locked out after a disagreement over money. She arrived with nothing but a canvas tote bag and a broken heart. I gave her the room overlooking the garden, and still the rooms filled. One by one, they brought their stories, their grief, their quiet resilience. They helped each other cook, garden, paint walls. Some couldn't sleep at first, too many years of fear. But little by little they softened. They started calling this place Marjorie's house. I didn't correct them. I opened the dining room for weekly dinners. I printed simple menus and clipped flowers from the garden. Clara brought music, old jazz records, and soon the laughter returned to the house. Not loud, not forced. Just real. Eva came back too. She started visiting on Saturdays, claiming she needed a quiet place to do her homework. But I noticed how she lingered in the kitchen, how she brought extra cookies just in case, how she listened intently when the women told their stories. She was learning, watching, healing in her own way. One afternoon she stayed late and helped Ruth roll out dough for pierogi. Afterward she leaned against the counter and asked, "Grandma, do you think people change?" I paused, then nodded. "I think people can, but only if they want to." She didn't say anything else, but she hugged me tighter that evening than she had in years. The town took notice. Helen started sending over extra tomatoes from her garden. The librarian dropped off boxes of used books. Even the mayor's office sent an email about community appreciation. I laughed when I read it, not because I needed recognition but because I realized something important. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't just a woman who'd been locked in a basement. I was a woman who turned her house into a haven, a place for the forgotten to be remembered again, a place for healing, a place for starting over. One night, after the dishes were washed and the floors swept, I sat in George's chair with my tea. I looked around at the women chatting softly in the next room, the warm glow of lamps bouncing off freshly painted walls, the sound of music playing low in the background. Peace had returned, but not the peace that comes from silence, the peace that comes from purpose. And I knew deep in my bones that I had done something good, not just for them, but for me. It happened on a Tuesday morning, the kind where the sky's overcast but the air still feels warm. I was in the kitchen stirring oatmeal when Dolores shuffled in wearing fuzzy pink slippers and a cardigan that swallowed her whole. "You know," she said, squinting at me, "this place feels more like home than my own house ever did." I smiled, handed her a mug of tea and said, "That's because it is home. For all of us." She nodded, tears pooling behind her glasses, and we didn't say another word. We didn't need to. There was something about this house now, something I couldn't have planned even if I tried. It buzzed with quiet joy. Every hallway echoed with new footsteps, not the stomps of entitlement but the gentle rhythms of people who were grateful to walk through the door. In the mornings I heard humming from the laundry room. Ruth always sang when folding clothes. In the afternoons Ava would stop by after school, drop her backpack in the corner, and chat with whichever resident was closest to the kettle. And in the evenings when the sun dipped low and the lights inside glowed gold, we sat around the big oak dining table, passing bowls of soup, warm bread, soft laughter. There were no titles, no hierarchies, no mother or daughter, no one controlling, no one forgotten. Just women who knew what it felt like to be pushed aside, and who chose to pull each other closer instead. It was Clara who first said it out loud. "I don't think I've ever seen a real family like this," she said one night after a community dinner. "Not in all my years." We were cleaning up, stacking dishes in the sink when she said it, casually, but with the weight of someone who'd seen far too many people abandoned in the name of family. I thought about that phrase for days. Real family. Not the kind you're born into, but the kind you find when you're broken, and someone reaches for your hand anyway. Eva hadn't called. Not once. Not to apologize. Not to scream. Not even to threaten. And somehow that silence no longer scared me. It liberated me. I'd spent so many years craving her approval, aching for her presence, bending myself backward just to earn a sliver of warmth. And for what? Love shouldn't feel like performance. It should feel like Sunday morning pancakes, shared secrets, quiet acceptance. It should feel like a room full of women who leave their doors open, just in case someone else needs a safe place to sleep. And here, in this house, that's exactly what it felt like. Ava, more than anyone, began to blossom. She stopped asking about her mother. Instead, she started asking about our stories. She spent hours at the table, recording interviews with Ruth, drawing sketches of Dolores's garden memories, writing essays about strength for her school projects. She called it the Resilient Women Project. Said she might turn it into a blog one day. I found her one afternoon, curled up in the den, typing furiously on her laptop. "What are you working on?" I asked. She looked up and smiled. "Your story, Grandma. I want people to know what you did. How you stood up for yourself. How you built something better." My throat tightened. "You're proud of me?" I asked, barely above a whisper. Her smile softened. "I brag about you every day." She didn't say it to heal me. She said it because it was true. Later that evening, after everyone went to bed, I sat alone in the living room and stared at the empty rocking chair across from me, the one that used to be George's. I imagined him there, legs crossed, one brow arched in that amused way he always had. "You see this, love?" I whispered. "You see what we've made?" And I swear in the silence I felt him nod. I walked through the house then, barefoot, quiet, touching the door frames, the walls, the photographs. There were new faces in the frames now. Not just Eva's school pictures or George's graduation photo, but Ruth and Dolores and Ava and Clara, the women who had come and stayed, the women who had chosen to belong. The guest rooms no longer felt like storage units. They felt lived in. Quilts draped over chairs, books stacked on nightstands, lavender sachets tucked under pillows. Love, not the conditional kind, not the manipulative kind, but the kind that asks for nothing in return. It pulsed in every corner of the house. I'd built a legacy. Not the one I expected, but perhaps the one I needed. One day, Ruth asked if she could plant a garden in the backyard. Said she missed the feel of soil on her hands. Of course I said yes. And together, we tilled the earth under George's old oak tree. We planted tomatoes, carrots, daisies. Dolores even brought out a little gnome statue she'd kept hidden in her suitcase. "This house needed something to smile at," she said. "I think it already had plenty of that." When Ava's school held a parent-grandparent day, she asked if I would come. "But not just as my grandma," she added. "I want them to meet Marjorie, the woman who turned grief into something good." I cried in the car after dropping her off that day. Not because I was sad, but because it had taken me this long to believe that maybe, just maybe, I had done something right. Not with Eva, but with everything after. It was a quiet morning, the kind where the world feels wrapped in cotton. The air was still, the sky a dull gray, and the house smelled like cinnamon and old wood. Ruth was humming in the kitchen. Ava was still asleep upstairs, and I was on the porch with a book I wasn't really reading. That's when I saw her. Eva. She stood at the end of the walkway, clutching a leather handbag, her shoulders hunched beneath a long coat. She looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I just stopped looking at her as the center of my world. I didn't move, just waited. Eventually she walked up the path, eyes downcast, one hand brushing the fence post like it might steady her. She stopped at the steps. "May I come in?" Her voice was dry, almost brittle. I nodded once. "You can sit." She lowered herself onto the wooden bench beside me, careful, like the boards might break. We sat in silence for what felt like forever, listening to the birds argue in the trees and the distant sound of someone mowing a lawn. "I heard about what you're doing here," she said eventually. "The shelter. Community. Whatever it is." "It's a home," I said. "For women who need one." She nodded, staring at her hands. "I saw your name in the paper," she added, quieter now. "Ava showed me the article. Said she helped with the writing." She did. Eva's lips twitched into something like a smile, but it didn't last. "I didn't come here to fight," she said. "Good," I replied. "I don't have any left in me." We sat a little longer. The breeze stirred the wind chimes, the ones George had hung the year Eva turned 10. They hadn't rung in years, not like this. It felt intentional. "I made mistakes," she said. I didn't respond. I was angry. At you, at life. I thought you owed me something for all the things I didn't have. I blamed you for not being more supportive, more understanding. I turned to her slowly. Supportive? Eva, I gave you everything. My time, my love, my home. You locked me in a basement on my birthday. She flinched. I know. I've had dreams about it. Nightmares. Good, I said softly. Maybe now you understand what it feels like to be treated like a burden. I was wrong, she whispered. I sighed and looked out at the yard. The oak tree had shed most of its leaves. The garden below it was still full of life, stubborn flowers pushing through despite the season. I'm not here to ask for anything, she said after a while. I needed to see it. What you've built. I needed to see you. I nodded slowly. You see me now. What are you going to do with it? She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a small photo. Wrinkled at the edges, the color fading. It was me, George, and Eva standing in front of the house. She must have been 10. Her smile was so wide back then. I keep this with me, she said, placing it between us on the bench. I used to keep it by my bedside, I said, until you made me feel ashamed of it. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She just nodded, wiped her face quickly, and stood. I'll go now, she said. I didn't stop her. But as she turned to leave, I spoke. I don't hate you. She stopped. But I don't trust you, I added. And I don't think I ever will. She looked back at me, eyes hollow. I understand. Love, I said, is not something you get by default. Something you earn. And you lost it the moment you decided I was dispensable. She nodded again. I'll live with that. I hope you grow from it, I said. Because Ava's watching. Her face crumbled slightly at her daughter's name. She loves you, I said. But don't assume that love is permanent if you repeat history. Eva placed a hand on the railing for balance. Thank you for letting me sit. For letting me speak. I met her eyes. Thank you for finally being quiet long enough to listen. With that, she walked away. No dramatic goodbye. No pleas for forgiveness. Just the slow sound of heels against pavement and the soft click of the gate closing behind her. When I walked back into the house, Ruth was setting the table. You all right? She asked gently. I nodded. More than all right. Was it hard? No, I said, almost surprised by my own answer. It was overdue. Later that night, I took the photo she left and tucked it inside the drawer with Ava's letter. Not out of sentiment, but because I needed a reminder. Of where I'd come from. Of how far I'd grown. And of the woman I would never be again. Have you ever had to choose peace over family? Share your story in the comments. The ceremony wasn't grand. No red ribbons, no TV cameras, no city council members in shiny suits. Just folding chairs on the lawn, the smell of fresh lilies from Ruth's garden, and a banner Ava painted herself that read, Welcome home. We called it the dedication. The official opening of Marjorie's house. Though the truth was, it had already been alive for months. This was just the moment we said it out loud. The day we told the world. This place exists. It's real. And it's not going anywhere. Teresa stood at the front, holding the microphone with both hands, her voice cracking as she listed the names of the first women who had stayed with us. Some had found jobs. Some had reconnected with lost family. Some had simply learned to sleep through the night again. None of this would exist, she said, if not for Marjorie Whitmore, who refused to be erased. There was a long, warm round of applause. I didn't stand. I didn't wave. I just sat there between Ava and Ruth, with my hands folded in my lap and my heart full to the brim. Later, the guests wandered inside, neighbors, local volunteers, women from the shelter system. They marveled at the quiet corners, the quilts on the beds, the walls lined with black and white photos of smiling faces and second chances. No one asked about Eva. And for once, I didn't feel the need to explain her absence. This wasn't about what she took from me. It was about what I built in spite of it. The oak tree in the yard had been strung with fairy lights. Dolores tied handwritten notes to the branches. Messages from residents, short and sweet. I feel human again. This bed is the first one I've called mine in years. You saved me. I didn't save anyone. All I did was open the door. That night, after the last guest left and the leftover sandwiches were packed away, I sat alone on the front steps. The banner still swayed in the breeze above the porch. The moon was out, low and kind like it always was when George used to hold my hand and walk me home. I closed my eyes and whispered, "We did it." Not just to him. To the house. To the part of me that once believed silence was safer than resistance. To the woman I had been before I was tested. Before I had to stand tall without anyone to catch me. There had been a time when I feared the sound of my own daughter's footsteps. Now the only footsteps I heard were soft ones. Ava tiptoeing behind me, setting a blanket on my shoulders before sitting down. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm more than okay," I said. She leaned into me, head resting on my shoulder. "I hope I'm like you when I grow up," she whispered. I looked at her, really looked at her. Her mother's eyes, yes, but none of Eva's cruelty. Just tenderness. Strength blooming young. "You'll be better," I said. "You already are." She smiled. And then softly, as if unsure, she asked, "Do you think Mom will ever come back? For real, I mean." I didn't lie. "I don't know," I said. "But even if she does, this place isn't waiting for her. We're moving forward." Ava nodded. She understood. We stayed like that for a while. 2 generations sitting beneath the stars, wrapped in the warmth of something real. Something earned. Inside, the lights were still on. Clara was doing a crossword at the kitchen table. Ruth was folding towels in the laundry room. Dolores had started baking again. Her late-night banana bread became something of a legend in the house. There was laughter here. There was music. There was life. And I was at the center of it, not as a matriarch, not as a victim, but as a builder. A restorer. A woman who had been pushed down and chose, instead of staying there, to build something that would never fall. The next morning I stood on the porch with a cup of coffee and looked out over the yard. The oak tree swayed gently, sun filtering through its branches. Birds hopped along the railing, unbothered by the world. And I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. Real peace. Not the kind that comes when things are quiet, but the kind that settles when you know who you are, and you're no longer waiting for anyone else to define it. Marjorie's house wasn't perfect. It wasn't fancy, but it was safe. It was warm. It was filled with women who loved without condition. And that, I realized, made it richer than anything Eva could have built with stolen money and false charm. Before I went back inside, I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small piece of folded paper. It was the last thing George ever wrote to me. A note he'd left on the nightstand a few days before the accident. "You're the heart of this home. Don't ever forget that." I smiled, because now everyone knew it too.